So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Wen Cafe. It's wonderful to see you all here. Oh, I'm so relieved because Martha's just joined us, our fourth speaker. So we're just getting underway here, Martha. Don't worry, you haven't missed anything. So welcome to our Wen Cafe on diversity in the workplace, a subject that is incredibly important for us here at Wen Wales, the Women's Equality Network Wales. Our vision is a Wales free from gender discrimination. And in terms of realising that vision, obviously, a big part of that is around the workplace and women in the workplace. And we want to see equal numbers of men and women in the workplace. We want to see men and women getting paid equally in the workplace. We want to see women on the senior leadership teams. And when I say women, I mean all women. That includes disabled women, women of colour, LGBT women, and women from all different socioeconomic backgrounds and protected characteristics. And as we all know, there is a gender pay gap in Wales. It has actually gone down recently by 2%, but it was 14%. Now it's about 12%. There is an ethnicity pay gap. And we also know that the employment rate for disabled people in Wales is half that of non-disabled people. So there's loads of work to be done in this area. And that's why I'm so pleased to have a really great panel here today who are going to help us explore this topic. And as I said earlier, I'm going to ask everyone some questions. We're going to have a bit of a discussion, and then you will be able to put your questions to the panel via using the Q&A function. So I'm really delighted, first of all, to welcome Rhian Parry from North Wales. Rhian is the Managing Director of Workplace Worksafe Limited and Wind Farm Workplace, and she's also created a social enterprise called Opportunity Alliance. And Rhian's a fantastic, incredible woman who came on the Wen mentoring scheme, though she probably didn't even need to. She could have mentored certainly lots of the women on the scheme. Anyway, so Rhian, starting with you, what does a diverse workplace mean to you?
I think the diverse workplace is ideas. Different people have different ideas, and from the situations they've grown up from and things like that. And I always have a mantra that I run by is, if you're the most intelligent person in the room, you need to be in a different room. Well, I think it's the same on diversity. If you've just got one set of similar people in a room, you're just going to have the same answer, aren't you? And it's about, well, you might have a problem, but somebody might just bring in an amazing idea that somebody wouldn't have thought about, but because they've got a slightly different background or thought process or whatever. So I think diversity is totally and truly so important in a workplace.
Thank you, Rhian. Excellent. And I'm going to come to Martha next. Now, Martha is a charity founder, and she's also a newly qualified tutor for FE students. And she's also one of our 100 Welsh women. So welcome, Martha. I'd really like to ask you to start with, what's influenced your thinking around diversity and inclusion, and what's motivated you to get involved as an advocate for change?
Hello. Yeah, I was just unmuting myself. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure as usual. It's always nice for me to be invited to be part of these panels, to be part of these discussions, because I really feel they are very, very important. As you say, I'm a charity founder. My charity is called Love Zimbabwe. And my charity looks after parents of disabled children. So it says in that I've been influenced because I grew up in Africa, I grew up in Zimbabwe, where equalities don't exist, especially for women. So as a girl who grew up in a village, in a rural area, firstly, there were inequalities between race. I never grew up with white people. And all I saw was the relationship between a white man and a black person being the servant and a white person being the host, being the boss, and inequalities amongst disabled people. As a person, a mother to a child who died with mental healthness, I felt I wanted to challenge these stereotypes that exist in my community by doing something that raises awareness that we are all human beings despite sex, gender, despite who you are, whether you're disabled or not. So all those things are things that have influenced my thinking around diversity. And then when I moved to UK, I actually realized that these inequalities, it's not just where I grew up, that they exist. They also exist even here in the developed world, where I've been shocked that we are in the 21st century, where you would think people in the developed world are more aware, are more well educated, have got more understanding about issues that affect minorities. But unfortunately, no, we're still struggling with inequalities. So that's what has influenced my thinking. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you very much. So next on to Leandra Craine, who is the Equip Project Officer at Disability Wales. She's responsible for connecting disabled people's organisations and disabled university students. So welcome, Leandra. Wonderful to have you here. Can you share with us what a diverse and inclusive workplace can do for people short-term and long-term?
Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. It really goes back to what Rhian was saying, because when you have limited demographics within your workplace, you're going to have limited thinking. By bringing in more diversity and having more thoughts and more opinions, you get such a wider point of view, which is really, really important. And you know, that's a good benefit for the short term, but also when you're developing this, what ends up happening is you become more inclusive as you're bringing in these voices all the time. But what that can also mean is, for an organization's point of view, this can be really beneficial for either customers, members, for example, and can actually bring in more, because people look at them and go, oh, it's inclusive, and brings in more people who are disabled or have other protected characteristics. So I think both kind of short term and long term is that breadth of view when looking at the world, I think, is the most important thing. And then the long term benefits of that are really, you know, wonderful.
Thank you, Leandra. That's really helpful. And finally coming to Ellie, who is head of HR or head of people at Sero, and which is a really fantastic company and a member of FOR Cardiff. So Ellie, why is a diverse workplace important to you?
Yeah, so I've worked in HR for a number of years, and I've been in the tech sector for a long time, which has its own kind of spin on kind of struggling with diversity. It's kind of renowned for being very kind of male dominant, and it really kind of, from my perspective, has an influence on the culture, and also, as Rhian was saying, it really influences the outputs that you're getting as a business. So there's that element of like groupthink. If you've got a very male dominated team, they're going to think about things that are familiar to them, whereas really kind of focusing on the diversity, you get a better blend of people within your team, you get stronger ideas, you get more diverse thinking, and also you get a really good culture as well, which has obviously its knock-on to performance, motivation, engagement, and things like that. But I mean, some of the things that I've become very aware of is, aside from sort of groupthink, is about data bias. Working in tech, the things that you create within the tech sector are only as good as the data that you put in. The outputs are going to have a negative impact because they're not going to be as beneficial to the diverse nature of the customers. So I think from an internal side of things, they're some of the reasons that diversity is super important from my perspective.
Okay, thank you, Ellie. Well, moving back to Rhian, who's a business person as well, as you'll have heard if you were here at the beginning of the seminar. Rhian is from North Wales and MD of Workplace Worksafe, as well as many other things. So Rhian, so we've talked a bit about how diversity can benefit your business, but what measures are you taking at your business to ensure inclusivity and diversity thrive? And does this relate to your own lived experience in any ways?
I set up a new social enterprise because I got really upset a couple of years ago. As we're quite inclusive and diverse here in sunny Ruthin, but we asked some people to help us with a product, and we asked adults with neurodiversity to help us, and the project was phenomenal, and I was just absolutely totally inspired. And then we've all heard about the problems in the industry for recruiting people, so I've made it my mission the last 3 years, and we're about to go. But I was like, well, actually, okay, the UK as a whole typically go to the same people every time when they're recruiting. I'm like, hold on, why don't we go and talk to people who really want a job and be massively grateful if they could have a job, but we've got a few barriers and we've got a few issues that we may need to get over. And I'm pretty sure they're going to be the most loyal member of staff you're going to have, work for you for many years and be utterly thankful for that job. So that's what we're going to do. And we're going to create not a bullshit job, sorry Catherine, swore, but a real job, real money, real opportunities. And I think that is the way the UK needs to go. It's, actually we need a diverse, we need to go to different parts of different communities to get single working mums or dads, mothers who may have been historically looking after children while the parents were in work, maybe the grandma. What about them coming back into work? They'd love to, now the kids have grown up, and adults with disabilities, there is a massive pool of people that nobody approaches. Well, let's turn that around. Let's do it.
Yeah. Can I just to follow up? What is the social enterprise going to be doing?
So my first pod, we're going to have different pods because I believe there's going to be different needs in different communities. I think this is going to be across UK, but we're going to do it in Wales first because we're Welsh, right? And we like to set the pace. So the first one is going to be industrial machinists. So if you think it's not going to be Mike Baldwin's Knicker Factory or anything like that, but that's what everyone thinks about it. We're going to have 100 people being trained from vulnerable communities, and maybe they may not be able to speak English, but we're going to get them trained up. We're going to get them to a level where we actually can introduce them to real employers who need people to fulfill the role. And actually, they're not going to get minimum wage. They're going to get better than minimum wage because it's a skilled job. UK don't do manufacturing anymore, so we're going to offer them career opportunities and work around, maybe even offer them a creche. So then we've got the childcare, because that's the biggest barrier for a lot of parents, isn't it? So if we can work together, remove the barriers, and let's get people into work, because there's plenty of people who want to work, they just can't access work at the minute.
Okay, thank you, Rhian. That's helped.
I'm a bit passionate about it.
I can tell, and that's helped paint a really good picture of how you're actually moving forward and trying to do something positive in terms of inclusivity. So that's amazing. So moving on to Leandra now. So can you share with us some of the specific ways you've advocated for change and the successes and challenges you've faced?
Of course, yes. I think one of the interesting things for me is when I was at university, I was doing a degree that was so far from disability rights, but I had a student placement and it really changed my mindset. And one of the biggest things that came out of that placement was I became more confident in advocating. And I did this a little bit as an academic representative, but I was really struggling to make change in the long term. So by coming into this field, I've really kind of taken that on and done my best. So one of the things we do is student placements, and we've had a good long look at the student placements we've offered, and we've really worked really hard on improving them and increasing, for example, some of the challenges we were having, because some students weren't qualifying for programs that are supposed to support students because they were too old. for example. So going through and looking at our processes and how we can support students who can't come in through a program, for example. And that's just, and we've had a great placement in the last year or so, and that was our first student, and it went brilliantly. And that's just one way I've been helping to advocate for change in terms of processes to make sure people aren't left behind, even those, you know, even with the programs that are there supposed to improve opportunities for people. And I've just been continuing that with the Equip project, and working to get as much opportunity out there as possible, especially for disabled university students, because that is the perfect time to get those different kinds of experience in.
That's really interesting, Leandra. And so yeah, there are barriers that Rhian talked about and that you've talked about, and it's about partly it's about thinking through, for example, Rhian mentioned the caring aspect, but for the people you're working with, it's about for disabled people, and it's about intervening early so that you try and stop or you know, make sure that there is a pathway to jobs, and if people want jobs. So that's, yeah, really interesting. Yeah, find out those barriers and overcome them. I'm going to come to Martha next, but I just wanted to ask you all to think about a question that we will ask soon, which has come in from Jenny Ramsey, which is, if there was one specific thing you'd like to see the Welsh Government introduce in this Senedd term, what would it be? So think on that, everyone, just to give you a bit of warning. But I want to come to Martha next, Martha, and ask you about what do you think, what are the long-term consequences? We do hear a lot of, can I call it diversity wash, perhaps? You know, it's like greenwash, where companies may say they're doing something positive, and they say that they're, you know, they've got a target, say, for 50-50 women and no gender pay gap. What are the consequences if all companies just give these encouraging words about diversity, but it doesn't actually lead to action and change?
You're on mute, Martha.
I keep forgetting to unmute myself. Sorry about that. Yeah, so what happens is we will continue to suffer discrimination and inequality, and results of that, it leads to a weaker society where other groups of people have no voice. For example, myself, since I've been in Wales, the last 2 jobs that I've been involved in, unfortunately, I've experienced a lot of feeling that I'm not included, and yet the organization would be saying things to make me feel like I'm part of the system, and that I'm not part of the system. So I think this is really bad, in that the country will lose. They will lose out on economically, socially, culturally, on what the minorities could contribute. So you end up, because you are withdrawn, because you're not part of the system, because they are pretending that you're part of the system, you end up having no voice within the organization. So there are psychological effects as well that affect the people within the organization who are not part of the inclusiveness. So most people end up not being part of those jobs. Most people end up not wanting to be part of that kind of community, that kind of society, because of those kind of nice words about diversity. I'm not sure if that's
yeah, I think it has answered it, Martha. I think it's because it's not only about setting targets and saying what you know, this is what we aspire to. It's about living that, and making sure that the workplace is welcoming to people of all protected characteristics. And I can see a comment from the wonderful Uzo Iwobi, who says, well said, there is a great need for change in welcoming and embracing diversity, and that is absolutely the case. It's not enough to say it, you need to embrace it. Absolutely. So Ellie, back to you now. And I just wanted to ask what actions you are taking. So having talked about that, you can't just kind of make promises. What actions are you taking at Sero? So I don't know why I'm having problems saying the word properly, in terms of diversity and inclusivity. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm actually quite lucky. One of the biggest things I would definitely say that's important is really getting that top level buy-in from your leadership. And it was something that the founders of Sero were already really passionate about. So not having to almost explain the business case for having a diverse workforce was a massive help for me, because it kind of means that I can just crack on with kind of looking for other strategies that we can focus on. But I would say, yeah, first and foremost, you've got to get the buy-in of your top level management, make sure that they're really kind of embracing diversity, they understand the benefits to the business, and then obviously thinking about the practical side of things. So right now, Sarah's going through a huge amount of growth. We're looking for doubling the size of the team. So we're recruiting quite a lot, and obviously recruiting is one of the kind of first stages where you really want to try and make sure that you've got no kind of subconscious bias kind of creeping in, because even though we're all in this forum and we're very aware of it, everybody's got their own sort of ingrained biases that you don't even realize that you have. So thinking about utilizing sort of software that's available now for recruiting that makes your applications anonymous, so that you've got no way of having any sort of creeping biases that you might have. That's a really definitely a way to go, and it's super easy and it's not massively costly to businesses. A lot of systems actually integrate it anyway. It's like simply a thing you can turn off, a function that you can have that's available. And also, if you're working with recruiting partners, so right now we don't have an in-house recruiter. That's something obviously we're looking to get to as we grow, but we use a lot of agencies, and we're very clear with them that when they send us candidates, we want to see a real split of diversity when they're submitting candidates, so that we're not just getting, you know, white men through for every single role, which is, if you don't spell it out, that is generally what you end up with. And so when we're very kind of clear, we're like, look, you sent us so many candidates, we want to see a real mix of candidates. Sorry, Martha, you're not on mute at the minute.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Why does it come out? I don't believe this. I'm so sorry.
It's okay, no problem. Thank you. Yeah, so having that split from your agencies is really important, and it can encourage them to really kind of look broader across the local market and possibly further afield, so that you're getting a really diverse number of candidates. And I'd also say we're even starting to think about positive action, which I think there's pros and cons to it. But if you're working in the tech sector, for example, sometimes you really have to kind of push and say, look, we don't have a very diverse workforce. It is very male heavy. So you end up actually saying, no, we want to look for women in the industry, and positive action is something that I do think has its benefits as well.
Definitely. I mean, we're not all in favour of positive action, because I think there is absolutely, if you think about it, there are kind of informal quotas and informal rules, if you like, that are keeping the status quo, and we need to change that. So has your business thought about setting targets, for example, on diversity, Ellie, or anything like that, to really drive the change that you want to see?
We kind of really want to be quite ambitious and really go like 50-50 with the targets, so that if we don't make it, at least we're aiming for that. And I think kind of going back to the question that you mentioned that was in here earlier on, from Jen, I think that's something I was going to sort of touch on, the fact that I know we've got the gender equality audit through the government for companies that are quite large, like over 250 people, but I think if they were going to put any changes through, it's really sort of making all companies look at their gender split and their salary data and all the diversity levels, because I think until you start looking at it, you don't necessarily realize where you've got those natural skews. So it's not until you suddenly pull a report and you go, oh my goodness, we've got hardly any people of this demographic, and you suddenly sort of realize where your kind of gaps are. And I would definitely say that's something that businesses should start thinking about, so that you're more aware, and then you can start targeting where you need to take action.
Definitely. Rhian, you've got your hand up, go for it.
I would go even further on that, because what you're saying, Ellie, is totally right, but it's how you recruit, and the tone of the advert, the tone of, you know, we're doing it at the minute of, we want to recruit a certain profile of people. So, you know, if you keep getting white blokes applying, then it's obviously directed to them. So, you know, we're having to be really innovative and think about, well, actually, we're talking to people to say, what would you like to see in a job advert would make you apply for a job with us, because we're great when you get here, but we're putting you off somehow. And I think you've just got to, if industry can start thinking about that, I think it'd make a big difference.
Yeah, that's a really valid point, actually. I didn't even think to touch on that. I was talking to our branding team a little while ago about the fact that we need to review all of our job descriptions, because the language you use can alienate women, for example, and there's a lot of analysis into the types of words you use. If you sort of say, I'm looking for somebody who's quite scientific and mathematical and analytical, they generally lean towards males, whereas if you're sort of like looking for organized and structured and a good communicator, generally it kind of goes towards the females. So when you're sort of thinking about in the tech sector, you're generally using a lot of masculine language, and so reviewing the words that you're using can have an impact on who you're attracting. So yeah, I totally agree with you.
Great, Ellie, thank you. Now I'm going to ask Martha the question about what is there one thing the Senedd could do, Martha, to improve diversity in the workplace? Back to Jenny's question.
I've unmuted myself.
Perfect. You good?
Yeah, I was just actually replying to Jen in the chat as well, because I just feel there is less representation of minorities. I think I'm not sure how many AMs from disabled community. I'm not sure how many AMs represent Black African communities as well. So I think if we have representation, I'm talking we as representing myself and the other people that are part of my community, that if we have a representation of disadvantaged people, it doesn't necessarily matter people from my background as a Black person, but people who are disadvantaged all should be also part of the Senedd. So we know we have a representation, so we know we've got a voice as well in the Senedd. That's how I feel.
Absolutely.
And
really,
that will impact on social policies, that will improve how they make their policies in the Senedd.
You're so right, Martha. And that's something that we're campaigning for, that some of you may know about, the Diverse 50/50 campaign. We're campaigning for gender and diversity quotas, because we think positive action is definitely needed to get the change we want to see. And I'm sure we can post in the chat the petition we've got going actually up until January the 31st, which is on this very issue around, it's great, Welsh Government have committed to gender quotas in the Labour Plaid Agreement, but we want to see diversity quotas as well. And quotas are fine because informal quotas have been in place since time immemorial. And it's those informal quotas that are returning the same white middle-class men and often white middle-class women too, to the Senedd. So we need to kind of sweep away the informal quotas and for a period of time put in place formal measures that will help redress that balance. And then you're right, Martha, I think it's the same as the Senedd, it's the same as a company. You need to have that positive action. Leandra, would you like to answer that question around what you'd like to see the Senedd do?
Yeah, I really would, because the interesting thing is that the Senedd is already doing a lot of stuff. I'm going to talk specifically about the disability sector. They actively support the social model of disability. They've put together a disability rights task force. There's the locked out report, where the issues disabled people faced during the pandemic were put in a report, including some very bad statistics. The problem is that unless you're in this area of the third sector, you probably don't know about any of it. And that's the problem, is there can be all of this good stuff going on and people don't know about it. So I personally think that we need more information coming out from the Senedd on all of these different issues, because I'm sure there are very similar things that Senedd is doing for women, for ethnic minorities, for example, and there are policies in place that people just don't know about. So I think focusing and honing in on the things they're already doing and making sure people, the general public, are aware of them is the absolute most important thing they should be doing, because at the moment it's just the people with an interest, if that makes sense, the people who are passionate about it. So it's only really the people who are affected by it reading it or seeing it, and that just makes the problem worse, in my opinion, because it doesn't actually help solve anything unless it is actually public wide.
Yeah, well said, Leandra. I agree entirely. And there's another amazing, really great list, and DW, Disability Wales, have been behind a lot of these changes. And another one is around the Access to Elected Office Fund, which is supporting disabled people to stand for election, which is amazing. Martha, you'd like to come in, and just a reminder, please everyone, do put more questions in the chat, but we'll come to Anne Collis's question shortly. Martha.
Now I'm just responding straight away to Rhian that is it actually having a positive impact towards the community? Is it actually happening? Is it actually doing it? Is there the practicality of it, or it's just written documents sitting in the offices where we don't see it, where we don't actually, we don't see the impact? Where is the practicality of it? It's all right to write a document. It's all right to come up with a policy, but where is the practical side of it?
Yeah, no problem. I'll do my best to answer those questions. So the locked out report was written, created by disabled people. Welsh Government have submitted a formal response. The creation of the Disability Rights Task Force was part of that response. These are all still in the organising phase, and they're going to be putting recommendations and stuff in, because they've only just really come together to start working on it. However, as Catherine said, there are other elements as well, like the Access to Elected Office Fund, that I should have brought attention to, because that is actively going on right this minute. You can apply for the fund to ask for funding for reasonable adjustments if you're standing for office. So I think that's maybe a better example than the one that first popped into my head, because again, I think general people don't know about it, and I think that's part of the problem. So I hope that answers it a little bit better, because there are written documents, written policies, lots of talk from politicians, obviously, and the Senedd in general, but they are making very productive steps. But if people don't even know what steps they're taking, that's the problem.
Got you. I think what we're all, it's interesting, isn't it? Because there are a lot of action plans. There's the Race Equality Action Plan, there's the LGBTQ plus action plan, there's the Gender Equality Review. So I guess there are lots of documents out there from Welsh Government, and then there's lots of things, is again, like the businesses maybe making commitments, but it's about, do they follow up with real action? And perhaps our job as activists is to kind of hold to account businesses and government to make sure that they do actually do what they say they're going to do. Now, I really want to come to Anne Collis's question, which is a really great question, around what she'd like to know, a business case that can be presented to a board of exec and non-exec directors to say, this is why you need diversity on your board. I think that's what Anne is asking for. So how did this help the business thrive? I'm guessing economically, because that's the way businesses often operate. What was it that worked, and who's got a business case? So Rhian, great, you've got your hand up.
I think it touches on what we've just spoken as well. So, I mean, I work in the renewable sector. So I deal with wind farms all over the UK, and they're desperately trying to get more women into the sector. And they've been trying for years, because you typically got young chaps who go and climb a wind turbine and fix it. And they're like, no, we want a diverse, and they're truly up for it. You know, they're talking the talk, they're walking the walk. They couldn't recruit people. And the business case was, they looked into it, I was talking to them about it, and the reason why women weren't joining was as simple as going to the toilet offshore on a wind turbine. So sorry for this discussion, but imagine if you're a lady and you come on your period and your boat is 6 hours away from you, you know, blokes don't have that problem, do they? And it was only once the business spoke to women and said, actually, what's stopping you from joining the industry? It's a toilet on a tower. Oh, is that it? Yes. Okay. Well, we're going to helicopter a toilet or lift it onto there, and they're getting more women into it. And they're like, because they truly want to embrace a really diverse culture, because they see the benefits of it. You know, the better problem solving, the fixing of, you know, the minds coming together. But I think we have to. You know, Martha touched on it, and Ellie did as well. Ellie is truly driving, and us as a business as well, we want a diverse workplace. But as Martha said, you've got to walk the walk and talk the talk. Unless somebody feels comfortable, or they are truly a diverse workplace, nobody's going to stay. So, you know, that's really, I think it's a really good case study of how industry can put that forward. You know, they just need to know, though, don't they? If we don't tell them, how are they ever going to know?
Absolutely. Martha, do you have your hand up, or is that from before? Ellie would like to say something, I think.
Sorry,
can I just, before you start, Ellie, can I also bring in the well-being angle? But you go first, because I'm conscious we're in FOR Cardiff's Wellbeing Week, and I think there's the element around diversity supporting well-being as well. So, but Ellie, first of all, sorry, do address.
I was just going to touch off the back of Rhian's statement about obviously thinking about what the blockers are. I recently read Invisible Women, and it was talking about data bias, and I highly recommend it. Yeah, I highly recommend it. It's absolutely brilliant. And I didn't realize where there were a lot of situations where women haven't been involved, and we've ended up at a disadvantage because the data is all very much focused around kind of men, or kind of not about disabilities or ethnicities and things like that. And I was really surprised by a lot of the content in that book. I highly recommend it. There were simple things like why women don't have pockets in their clothes, but just talking about what you were saying, Rhian, about thinking about what people need. There was one section in there, there was a female CEO, and she was talking about how she didn't have any children. I don't have kids, and I'm very aware that even though I am a woman and I'm trying my best to overcome diversity challenges and things like that, because I am not a parent, I very much feel like I can't empathize. Well, it's not that I can't empathize, but I didn't appreciate some of the challenges that working parents go through. So even though I'm female and I'm kind of fighting the good fight and everything, reading that book, it really highlighted that this female CEO, she'd sort of realized when she got pregnant about how she had to park her car miles from the office and walk to the office, and how she had really sort of sore ankles and how her feet hurt and things like that. And she suddenly thought, oh my goodness, like even though she was a woman in business and really high up, she hadn't appreciated the challenges that pregnant women or working women had gone through. And she suddenly changed the rules that women who were pregnant could park close to the offices. But it's like thinking outside the box, like just because we're women doesn't mean we kind of all fit into the same categories. Like I don't have any disabilities, I'm white, and it's trying to think outside of those boxes as well.
Absolutely. I don't know if you want to say anything, Leandra, about the question that we were talking about, which Anne asked in the chat around case studies of business cases for board and diversity.
Yeah, I'm happy to say something. So I did pop it in the chat as well because I wasn't sure how long I was going to have my screen break for, but I was enjoying it too much and wanted to come back, to be honest. So with our organisation, we can have disabled people's organisations be members, but in order to qualify this, they need to have a resolution saying that 51% of both their management committee and members have to identify as being disabled. So obviously this works best when you're looking at organisations that work in the third sector or advocacy groups. But just as an example, because I also noticed your comment about, you know, making a more diverse board, and having similar kind of resolutions for other types of diversity would also be really beneficial there, I think. And just to add on a little bit from what Ellie was saying in terms of just because you're a woman doesn't mean you know what all women go through, and the same goes for the disabled community as well. There are so many different types of issues that you can have in terms of accessibility, and it's all about getting information from those with lived experiences and getting as much information from as many people as is physically possible. And that's the only way that you can work to be better and be as inclusive as possible, is by listening to those with the lived experience from as many of them as you can get, really.
Absolutely, I agree entirely. And I think what all those points have emphasized to me is the importance of listening to your staff and your board, and opening yourself up to other people's opinions, and really trying to understand and walk in people's shoes. And it's something that I strive to do every day. And I know we at When Wales have got more to do in terms of diversity. We've got an incredible team of 7 who are amazing, and but yeah, I know we've got more to do. But I wanted to bring in the wellbeing aspect now. And in your experience, panel, what wellbeing benefits does a diverse workplace bring, do you think? Because we are in Wellbeing Week, and can diversity really help with well-being in the workplace? So who wants to answer that one first? Leandra, go for it.
I think it's a really interesting question, because it's something I was having a discussion with someone else about this quite recently. And what it is, especially when looking at reasonable adjustments and accessibility, when you actually look at what kind of reasonable adjustments there are, and how you can improve accessibility, it's actually beneficial for everyone, not just the disabled person you're creating these accessibility aids for. So things like, I had a really good example the other day of speech to text software, because if you've broken your arm or something and can't type, it'll benefit you as well. Or if you're just having a bad day where you can't function very well, you can use other kinds of software to help you. And it shouldn't just be, oh, if you're disabled. It should be available for everyone. And I think having that kind of attitude where you can just go, I'm not having a great day, I'm not disabled, but I would benefit from this, and being able to go, yeah, okay, here you go, sorted. And also just, and I think the importance of diversity and inclusion is, and this is something I've experienced working for Disability Wales, is it's so much easier turning around to someone and going, I'm struggling with this lately, because they can empathise and understand what I mean. And I always, when I think of larger organisations, I always worry about the token diverse person, as it were, because they're just stuck there by themselves, and if they're in a room full of people who just won't get it, they can then become very isolated as well. And that's also quite concerning, and can really damage well-being if you don't have people you can turn to who can empathise and understand, which, going back to your original question for me, that long-term and short-term benefits is being able to have general support from the people around you. And it's so important when you're at work to be able to have that, because everyone will have a bad day at work or a stressful day, and being able to have a good team around you can just really change how that day affects you. And I think that's really important.
Amazing, Leandra. Yeah, that very well said. Yeah, being the token person is not a good place to be. Martha.
I just feel when someone is included, when someone is part of the system, when they feel they're celebrated, it adds up a lot on their psychological well-being. It adds up on their their personal well-being. I can only give an example myself, what I've done for the people in Zimbabwe, introducing a community center for disabled people. The women that I support in Zimbabwe, they've always been shunned by the community. So they were seen as people who are useless. And when we introduced a community center, I'm amazed how much they've come up. They've blossomed, because now they feel they are being respected despite the disability element, despite that they've got children who are disabled. So I feel when we introduce diversity in our communities, in our workplaces, it encourages people to improve their well-beingness, to engage them in the whole aspect of the community when they feel they are part of the system. So I really think diversity is really important, not just in workspaces, but I think in the whole arena of life. And they thrive, yeah.
Well said. Absolutely, it is. It so is. So I've got a really good question here from I'm not sure who changed that last is the name on the chat. So how do we balance listening and learning from those with lived experience, but whilst ensuring their safety and well-being? Because it can be traumatic for people to have to recount their experiences to those who haven't had the same challenges. So I'd really like one of the panelists to come and answer that one. Leandra, you've got your hand up first again, go for it.
I think the most important thing around talking about lived experience is you never harass anyone. Oh, can you tell me about this? Can you tell me about that? Can you tell me your experience when you went to this traumatizing thing? That is absolutely the wrong thing to do. However, you know, be open and say, if you ever want to talk about your experience and how we could improve, I'd be happy to listen, but always give the person with lived experience control over what they share. Because I mean, I've got it personally. There was one experience I had, and I couldn't talk about it for a year to the people because I would just get so emotional trying to explain why it was so traumatizing for me. And I'm a lot better with it now, but I would have found it traumatic if someone had hassled me to say, oh, but why was that a problem? You know, you were the only one who had an issue with that. Well, I was the only person there who couldn't do stairs, you know. So I think that's really important, is making sure never to overly focus on one person and go, oh, tell me about this, tell me about that. But also, if you're being there ready and open to listening, that also means that you may not truly be able to completely empathize, and it's very important to be honest and just go, I'm not, you know, I don't work the same as you, so I can't 100% see it that way, but that doesn't mean I won't support you in what you're saying and accept what you're saying, because I'm not like you, so I won't understand it. And it's okay to say that you don't understand, but you will act on what they've said. And I think that's really, really important to remember.
Oh, thank you, Leandra. Really good advice. Rhian, you've got your hand up. You go next.
I think just following on from that, Leandra, is respect. You know, it's having the respect and you know, asking somebody, do they want to talk about it? And, you know, genuine respect, not, oh, well, we're ticking a box here, what can we do? It's, you know, you've got to genuinely want to help or make a difference. And I think that comes across in how you talk to people and things, because we've all been sat in a room when somebody says, oh, how are you doing? And they don't, you could say, do you know what, I'm about to jump off a cliff, and they, oh, okay, fine, but you know, actually I'm really not there today, I don't want to be in work. Honestly, my guys sometimes here, they're having a tough day, so do you know what, we take the foot off the pedal, and yeah, even I'm not allowed to, but give them hugs. You know, I've been sat across the table holding a hand. Are you all right? Somebody split up with a girl. Go home. Honestly, just go home. You're going to be no good in here today. I don't mean that horribly, but just go home, go and have a coffee and get yourself together. And I think if you're genuinely compassionate and you want to help, I think that goes such a long way for people.
Yeah, absolutely, Rhian. Ellie.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of echo everyone's sentiment and thinking about the benefit of diversity. I think it's got huge benefits to kind of culture within an organization, and it helps improve like awareness and tolerance, sharing kind of each other's experiences. And I really like what you said earlier, Catherine, about listening, but I think also what Leandra and Rhian was saying about the fact that you need to ask sometimes. Like a lot of the time, I think typical British, we've grown up with this, oh, I don't want to ask, but sometimes you've got to almost overcome a little taboo and be like, would you mind sharing your experience? And I think that's important, Leandra, as well, sort of saying, would you mind, would you feel comfortable talking to me? Because some people are like, yeah, of course I will tell you, but other people are actually, no, I'd rather not. And you've got to give them the opportunity to decline that if they want to. But yeah, definitely it helps build kind of education within the workforce and fosters that kind of cohesion within a team and that shared empathy and understanding of each other's situation, because they may not encounter a diverse group of people at home or within their social setting, whereas in a workplace you might have the opportunity to have a really diverse group of people engaging and sharing their experiences.
Thank you, Ellie. There's a question in the chat, and this will probably be our final question as we're coming towards the end. But there's a question in the chat around the barriers that disabled people face can mean not being able to work like 9 to 5. It can be unachievable. What can be done about this? It's interesting. I think Rhian's company, Social Enterprise, is potentially an example of something that can be done about this, but I'm guessing Leandra might have something to say on this.
Oh, definitely. The issue with larger organisations in particular is that they pay a lot of money for these offices. And so they kind of expect people to go in and use them, essentially. And that makes it very, very difficult. Now, obviously, due to the pandemic, a lot of people have been working from home. What's interesting about this, especially for a lot of disabled people, is that many, many people have been asking to work from home for years and denied. And then people were able to turn that around in a couple of months and make it work, which I find very interesting. But it's also not. So having the option of how you work is very, very important, and something more organization should be doing. So also encouraging flexible working. So I'm on a part-time contract myself, but I have it spread over the 5 days so that I can have a 2-hour lunch break to help just regather my energy to do work in the afternoon. And that works really well for me, but it's only because my organization gave me the freedom to be able to do that was in place. If I had to go in and do a 9 to 5 every day, I would not be in work. It is that simple. I would not be able to do it. So I very much relate to the question. So hybrid working as well. I just saw that go in from Martha, having that flexibility and personal choice, as it were, and everyone should be able to have that choice, because it's not just disabled people, parents who need to be able to go do the school run, for example. But I'll let other people speak as well, but that was my piece on it.
Thank you so much, Ellie.
Yeah, Leandra, everything you said, I think there's definitely been positives out of the pandemic. One thing I always emphasize whenever I'm chatting to new candidates within Sero is that our company was really kind of bit of a trailblazer. They were offering flexible working before the pandemic, and I think a lot of companies have sort of jumped on the bandwagon, but one thing that we try and distinguish is the fact that there are some companies that are what we talked about, the kind of diversity washing, and there's a lot of flexible washing going on where companies are like, yeah, we're flexible, but you've got to be in between these hours and you can have your lunch between these hours. So we very much talk about true flexible working, and our company is really proactive, and they're like, if you want to finish early, or if you want to start late, if you want to work on the weekend and take a half day, it's focusing on outputs. And I think that's one thing that's really important, regardless of what your commitments are. I think the pandemic is really kind of shifting the world of work with regards to how we're working. It's more about outputs and effectiveness, not bums on seats 9 till 5.
Exactly. Yeah, we've given up our Wen Wales office, and I feel like we're much more agile now, because anybody, you know, people didn't actually have to come into work, you know, and that they could, we've got people with kids doing school runs, and so on, and people with maybe caring responsibilities, whatever. And it's just really, I feel like that the adjustments and the hybrid way of working has had some real benefits, not just for our own well-being, but also for, if you think about it, the environment. Rhian, quick comment from you, and then I'm going to wrap up. You're muted.
Sorry, we've been talking about this quite a lot, and I think, you know, we have to recognize you're always going to have some superstar salesperson who wants to go in and do 12 hours and they want to get a bonus and they want to be whereas you've got some people who would be all they go to work to is to pay for the bills or for the holiday or survive. You know, they don't want a career, they're quite happy how they are. And it's like, actually, businesses, industry have to be a bit more agile in what they're offering to people, and saying, actually, you know what, we might need to get 4 people to cover one person's job, but if our productivity is exactly the same and we get the same output, what's the problem? Okay, it's a little bit of a pain with pay and, you know, having extra people on payroll, sorry Ellie, but it's not a big drama really, is it? So, you know, I just think, you know, the government and the industries have to really look at what people want, what they're coming back. But if we push back to them and say, actually, I only want to work 3 hours a day, can I just say I'd love to do that, by the way? I would really love a 3-hour day. Or I want to work 12 hours, or actually I want to work 3 days and have 4 days off. You know, we've got to, and look at the industry and how can we be agile enough to be able to offer really good work to people, because we're missing out on such a diverse workforce that could bring so much to them. You know, it'd be silly not to.
Thank you so much. What an amazing discussion. I feel like I've really learned a lot, and I hope those attendees have also, who've come. Thank you so much to our amazing panelists. There are just 2 more things I want to raise. One is we are going to do shortly a quick poll to just gather some data on how who's come to this event, because we do need that. And also I'd really love to encourage you all to do the poll, which is right there. And also I wanted to mention we've got our When at 10 fundraising is going on right now. It's our 10th anniversary, and we're celebrating that by doing some ridiculously crazy things like a skydive, but we're also doing other things, and you can get involved by doing physical activities or some enjoyable non-physical activities, and raise money doing things for us. And we'd really love you to get involved. Meg has put the link in the chat. So all it remains for me to say is a huge thank you to our amazing panelists, who have been absolutely brilliant. I'm sure you all agree. And also a really big thank you to FOR Cardiff for doing this event with us today, and, you know, introducing us to a new audience and a new business, Ellie's organisation, Sero. So thank you so much, everyone. It's been a real pleasure talking to you all, and see you again soon at our next Wen Cafe.